So I was playing Marvel Spider-Man on PC, and I have to say, what a wonderful game! I enjoyed it so much that I decided to complete it for 100%.
Hello, New York!
At some point I became curious to see how many other players felt the same way, and I was shocked to find out. Do you know the percentage of players that usually go for 100% in games? If we look at other popular open world titles, we can see that it differs quite a bit. For example, only 1.7% of players completed Red Dead Redemption 2, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has a completion rate of 3.2%. God of War fared better at 5%, but the highest completion rate I found was Horizon Zero Dawn at 6.2%. Can you imagine? 1 in 17 people that bought the game enjoyed it so much that they decided to do all activities in it. So Spider-Man is at a whopping 16%. This means that every 6th player fully completed this fairly long game. And if you consider that only 45% of people finish the main story, that is every 3rd person that went and completed all activities after that. So what's so special about Spider-Man that makes people strive to complete it? That's what I aim to explore in this video. I've played through the game, completed and unlocked everything. Also completed the DLC and even 100%ed Miles Morales. From my experience, I believe that there are 3 equally important steps to creating a game that people would want to complete. Let's dive into them right now. Step 1. Create a good core game. I know this might seem obvious, but the first step to creating a game that people will want to complete is to make sure that the game itself is great, with core mechanics that are just fun to play. You need a strong foundation of engaging gameplay and compelling storytelling, and Spider-Man absolutely delivers on both fronts. It's not easy to make a superhero relatable. They are often larger-than-life figures with problems and powers that seem so out of reach for most people. But Insomniac totally nailed it with Peter Parker. His relations with Aunt May, Dr. Octavius, MJ and Miles all feel genuine and believable. This Spider-Man isn't the typical teenage hero we've come to expect. He's already mature and experienced and faces appropriate real-life struggles. Peter deals with relationship issues.
You know, just dinner between friends.
Friends. Was that what we are?
Financial problems, worries about what to do with his life, and has troubles with managing his time. These are real personal struggles that anyone can relate to. What sets Marvel Spider-Man story apart is that it is not just about fighting crime and saving the day, even though that part is very good. The game is not centered around the superhero persona, it's about Peter's personal life and his struggle to balance these two roles.
You have to learn to swallow that Parker pride and accept that you're human, like the rest of us.
The game emphasizes that behind the mask and all the superpowers, Spider-Man is just a regular guy that wants to help people not only as Spider-Man but also as Peter Parker.
But Dr. Octavius' work will help millions. I'm right where I want to be, right where I should be.
Almost sounds like it's more important than your other job.
It is about being the best person you can be and trying to help others no matter what. I believe that it's this human element that really draws players in. Spider-Man always has been about the fact that anyone can be behind the mask. It allows players to connect with the character on a personal level and creates a deeper investment in the story. While having a fantastic story is important, gameplay is just as essential to making a game great. And Marvel Spider-Man delivers here too. One of the standout features of the game is the traversal system. Everybody has said that a million times by now, but I think it's worth reiterating just how impressive it really is. Traversal in Spider-Man is truly unmatched. Swinging through the concrete jungle of Manhattan is such a uniquely exhilarating experience. There are no other games that compare. The movement and its fluidity are on another level. And not only does it look and sounds great, but it also feels great to play. There is a skill involved. You have to think about your next move, press appropriate buttons and time your actions. It's not just mindless button mashing, but properly engaging gameplay that you are in control of. Of course, traversal isn't the only thing that Spider-Man has going for it. The combat is also on a good level. Although it could be deeper. It's high quality gameplay and has some depth to it, with plenty of ways to fight. As you progress through the game, you'll face tougher and more diverse enemies, each with their own unique strengths and weaknesses that you need to play around with. For instance, most enemies are weak in the air, incentivizing air combat, but there is an enemy that will yank you to the ground, countering that playstyle. Enemies like this add a degree of strategy, forcing you to adapt your playstyle on the fly. Like the need to deal with anti-air enemies first. It keeps the gameplay feeling fresh and exciting, and the various gadgets and costume powers help to diversify the gameplay even further. However, there are some issues with the combat that prevent it from being truly exceptional. While there is a good amount of variety, you may find yourself relying on certain tactics over and over again because they just work. For example, the second costume power that you get is way too good and fun, which sounds like a positive. Fun and strong powers are good after all, but it makes it hard not to fall back on it all the time. It has a shorter cooldown time than other powers, while being able to sometimes win whole encounters on its own, and it's available basically at the start of the game. All this makes other powers that you get after it feel less impactful in comparison. It would be great to see more balance in the powers and gadgets to encourage more experimentation and diverse playstyles. Adding to all this is the lack of deep gameplay or any unusual playstyles. Everything plays relatively the same throughout the whole game. This lack of complexity also means that reaching a skill ceiling is somewhat easy. And although it feels awesome to beat a bunch of bad guys with the style and skill, flawlessly dodging everything and not taking damage, after 25 hours of the same gameplay, even this may start to feel repetitive and even dull. The game tries to alleviate this through the introduction of different enemy types, although it's not enough. Difficulty setting could maybe improve this, but the strategy involved in defeating enemies really does not change with the difficulty. Higher levels only add more health and damage to the enemies, rather than making the combat system more complex. But despite all this, the overall combat system is engaging enough to keep you entertained and invested in the game for a long time. So the foundation is great, but having great core gameplay and story doesn't at all guarantee that players will complete other activities. We can just look at games like Sleeping Dogs, an otherwise excellent open world title that many people love, including me. The main game is great, but secondary activities not so much. They suffer from repetitiveness a lot and don't offer anything truly interesting. As a result, only 3% of players went for 100% completion. To avoid this, your game needs to go a different route. And this is where we come to the step 2, quality side activities. Side activities are an integral part of any open world game. They can provide a fun distraction from the main storyline, add more depth to the gaming experience, and give players a chance to explore and interact with the world in unique ways. I don't know why, but unfortunately, many games fail to give enough attention to these activities and provide low-quality content instead. Repetitive missions and generic tasks that feel like an afterthought that was thrown together at the last minute. A checkbox that must be checked no matter what. Thus we have such widely beloved missions as fetching quests and kill 10 rats. Collectibles are one of the aspects of side activities that often fall short in games like this. At best, they provide players with a bunch of text notes that the majority of player base would not read. But often you can see even worse examples, when collectibles are nothing more than a number that goes up every time you find one. No engaging gameplay to go with and no interesting rewards. It's just a chore that you must go through to get to 100%. In contrast, Marvel Spider-Man provides a variety of collectibles that are both interesting and engaging to find. One type of collectible is old Peter Parker's items that you can find in bags scattered all over the world. Each item is a unique 3D model that you can look at, and Peter provides commentary on them, giving players more insight into his backstory and development as Spider-Man.
My prom boutonniere. Crushed when I had to fight Fisk. That kinda symbolizes my luck with relationships.
This adds depth to the game world and provides excellent fan service for those interested in the Marvel universe. This is a quality collectible that is easy to find, enjoyable to interact with, and expands on the world all at once. And that's just one of the activities. Another thing you can do in Spider-Man is landmark photography. Some of the most notable places in New York are marked on your map, and you are tasked with taking pictures of them. Not only does this encourage you to explore the city, but it is also an excellent incentive for players to utilize the awesome traversal mechanics of the game. You will not only visit famous real landmarks such as the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty, but also locations from Marvel Comics such as the Avenger Tower and the Sanctum Sanctorium.
Cool window, but I always get the feeling something strange is going on in that place.
It's cool to see these places even though they do not take part in the main storyline whatsoever. And it is something that makes sense for Peter to do since he used to be a journalist, which he never misses bringing up.
And that's why Jonah paid me the big bucks.
Research stations are another type of side activity that I like. Unlike other tasks that focus more on the protagonist, this one explores how different corporations and superpowers affect the regular people of New York. Each station offers a unique mini-mission about some research that will help the city. Additionally, this quest chain introduces Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend who isn't very present in the game outside of this activity. This adds to the game's world building and sets up potential storylines for future games, as I'm sure that Harry would be one of the main characters in the sequel. We can see that each of the activities we've just discussed are all great additions to the game. Not only do they provide enjoyable gameplay, but also they enrich the game's world building. And there is more stuff like that in the game. However, not all activities are created equal, and one that falls short the most is the crimes. Spider-Man must respond to random small crimes that appear on the map, such as car chases, robberies, or hostage situations. While some of them offer a bit more variety, like quick time events or using the hut to find hostages, most of them boil down to fighting a small group of enemies and nothing else. Essentially, a group of 10 enemies will randomly spawn on the map and you must engage in combat with them. And this is the whole activity. It lacks any depth and offers no unique features or any world building to support these encounters. Just beat this small group of enemies and go on with your day. Other fighting activities at least try to introduce a twist to this simple structure. For example, enemy hideouts have a lot of enemies at once, with additional waves coming in over time. So you need to engage with a large group of dangerous enemies for a long period of time, making for a prolonged and intense combat experience. Meanwhile, Taskmaster fighting challenges offer you just that, a challenge, with players being ranked based on how quickly they finish the fight and how little damage they receive, so you are motivated to do the best job you can. Crimes are nothing like that. Just a few easy to handle enemies bunched up together. It's repetitive and uninspired, especially in contrast with other activities that manage so much more. And it's not even the worst part about crimes. We will talk more about them in step 3. Overall, despite some repetitiveness, on average, the quality level of Spider-Man's side activities is pretty high. It is not ideal, as some activities are more enjoyable than others, with one being a huge outlier. Though the game does a decent job of balancing higher quality activities with lower quality ones, ensuring players have a good mix of content to choose from. That being said, it would have been nice to see even more variety offered to players here. and probably have less emphasis on constant fighting. We are not done yet, as there is one more crucial step on the way to a game that people would want to complete, and it is step 3, accessibility and incentives. You know, I'm somewhat of a completionist myself, but there are very few games that I have really 100% done, because most games feel like their completion is inaccessible. And by inaccessible I don't mean hard, I mean requirements that are so harsh that it feels like a chore. Accessibility is key when it comes to game completion. Players should not have to spend countless hours grinding to reach the completion stage. Games that have inaccessible requirements can deter even the most dedicated completionists. Good examples here are Red Dead Redemption 2 and Breath of the Wild. Both have great core mechanics and interesting side activities, but the sheer number of these activities and their repetitiveness makes completion nearly impossible for the average player. Personally, I love finishing side quests, unlocking armor and weapons, and exploring the world in games I enjoy, but often there would be some side activities that are just way too grindy. It's okay to have some grinding, but most games step over the limit. This is a huge issue with Breath of the Wild for me. I loved the game and completed all the main stuff, all the shrines, the DLC and most side quests. However, the game considers this to be only a 33.5% completion, because the requirements for 100% are just out of this world. Grindy stuff such as filling out the compendium with all 389 photos, finding all 900 Koroks, and not just unlocking, but fully upgrading every single armor set. That's what I mean by inaccessible. Very few people have hundreds of hours to spend collecting resources and making photos in a Zelda game, so very few people would even consider going after completing this game. Marvel's Spider-Man, on the other hand, does a much better job when it comes to completion requirements. They feel very accessible and achievable. After finishing the main game, I was already around 75% on the way to completion, just by doing some side stuff along the way. An example of accessibility in this game is offering optional activities that are not required for completion, such as secret photo ops and collecting Bugle magazines. These tasks may be too complex or too boring for some players, so it was a wise decision to exclude them from the 100% completion requirement. This allows players who enjoy those activities to do them at their own pace, without forcing everyone else to also grind them. And for those who do complete them, they are rewarded with a secret costume, making it a win-win-win situation where everyone is happy. The only major thing that bugs me with the accessibility in Spider-Man is, once again, the crime activity. Now, don't get me wrong. On paper, this is a great way to break up the main gameplay with small, quick side activities. However, there's one major issue: there are just way too many of them. With a total of 150 crimes required for 100%, if each one takes about 4 minutes to complete, that's around 10 hours of repetitive small fights. That's a significant amount of time for such low effort content. In my opinion, the game could have benefited from having much fewer crimes. After all, there are other activities that also involve fighting enemies that I have already mentioned, like Taskmaster fighting challenges, hideouts and some side quests. All of them added together means way too much fighting. To make matters worse, there is a problem with the balance of other side activities compared to crimes. I found myself finished with all other stuff, but still had a long list of crimes to deal with, which made completing them feel even more like a chore. And it really baffles me, as other activities seem much more well designed in terms of balance. For instance, there is a task of catching pigeons. It is not that intriguing and can be a bit awkward, so the game includes only a few of them on the map. You don't have time to be bored with them, because you are already done. Similarly, clearing out hideouts can become totally monotonous after a while, but the game strikes a better balance here with 20 bases to tackle, a much more manageable number than 150. This is called padding. Padding content is a common practice among some developers to increase the game's longevity. Instead of offering meaningful and enjoyable content, they resort to padding the game with repetitive and uninspired activities, which do not contribute to the game's overall quality. This is done mainly in hopes of appearing as a much bigger game than it actually is. All this really does is turning people away from playing. Players should feel motivated and engaged by the content they're playing, not discouraged or annoyed by it. Accessibility is important, but not everything. It's equally as important to have your players incentivized in completing a game. Incentives are small things that encourage players to engage with the content. In Spider-Man we can see a very direct approach to this. Once in a while you will be prompted by the game to go and do things in the city.
Got some time to kill before Doc needs me at the lab. Let's do a little Spidey workout in the city.
This way you don't feel like you are messing about while the city is in danger. A rather more common way to incentivize players is to give gameplay rewards that you get for doing content. At the very least, there should be some cool reward when you finally reach 100%. Though unlocking the best thing in the game when you already finished can feel icky, as it's basically useless now. That's why I think it's much better to reward players along the way to completion, not just at the end. Offering fun rewards for 50%, 75% and so on can make the journey more enjoyable and motivating. Spider-Man takes this idea even a step further by integrating side activities into the main gameplay loop in a really satisfying way. The tokens you earn from completing activities can be then used to upgrade your equipment and unlock suits, so you get directly rewarded for doing side stuff, and thus have the incentive to get involved more with them, which is great. The best part here is that unlockables are affordable and don't require any grinding really. The casual player that doesn't need to unlock everything will easily get only the stuff that they want. And even if you decide to unlock almost everything, you don't need to go for 100% to do so either. I was able to unlock most of the suits and gear at around 80% completion. Plus, you also get a fun suit for 100% itself. What I like about it is that it is not the best suit in the game by any means, and instead is more of a meme, so you don't feel like you've missed out by not using it throughout the game. In summary, if you want your game to be completed by more players, it needs to be accessible to said players and should provide meaningful incentives to keep people engaged. In the case of Spider-Man, the game does a decent job of that and strikes a nice balance between accessibility and challenge. However, there is always room for improvement, and this franchise is no different from that. So here is the big question. Has it already improved? We don't yet have a sequel, but we do have a DLC and a spin-off. So let's take a look and find out whether they address the issues and provided a better experience, or did they simply replicate what was already there. DLC: The City That Never Sleeps. The only DLC to Marvel's Spider-Man is named The City That Never Sleeps. Even though it is considered a singular DLC, it is actually made of 3 distinct chapters that were released over the course of 3 months. Each chapter features a standalone story that ties into the grand plot of the entire DLC. The chapters also include individual activities and side missions that are separate from the main game, with their own completion meters. Regarding the story of the DLC, I have to say that it wasn't nearly as developed as the story in the main game. One thing that bothered me the most is the fact that Peter seems a lot more gullible and just directly stupid. Throughout this 7-hour story, he constantly falls for obvious tricks, lies and traps. Progressing through the story at the expense of the character's intelligence is weird, especially as he never seemed that way in the main game.
Are you sure she's not just playing you?
I know her. She wouldn't be working for someone like Hammerhead unless she had to.
Okay, well...
However, even with this issue, I still think it's worth checking out. It is included in the remaster anyway, so there is little reason not to. Plus, it sets the stage nicely for the Miles Morales game. So, what about side activities? Overall, it's more of the same, but the developers clearly put effort into addressing some of the main game's flaws. All 3 chapters include good old crimes and challenges. Crimes are basically the same thing absolutely, with each chapter adding 1 or 2 new elements. There are 20 crimes per chapter, which is less of a grind than in the main game, but still as uninteresting as always. Screwball challenges are different from Taskmaster challenges of the main game, and can be considered an improvement, as they add more twists into the mix, though Screwball character herself can be too much for some people.
If you don't disable them, they'll knock out power across the city. Oh, and if you don't disable them in the right order, zap! Better hurry.
Though sometimes even her words can hold great value, so you better listen to what she says.
For those watching, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.
One by one from here. Chapter 1 features a brand new activity that involves collecting stolen paintings throughout the city. While it's not revolutionary, it's something new and different from the main game, with an intriguing subplot that connects to the chapter's main story. Unfortunately, Chapter 2 doesn't feature any unique activities like that, and instead returns to familiar hideouts. This is a bit disappointing, as hideouts and crimes were probably the most unexpired activities in the main game, and they are the ones that returned. Chapter 3 also has more hideouts, but it makes up for it by introducing another new activity. While it's not particularly exciting in terms of gameplay, it has an interesting plot and a side mission at the end, making it a net gain overall. It's clear to me that the developers wanted to entice players into buying the DLC with Chapter 1, which for me seems like the most fun of the 3, even if by a little. While the DLC overall still has some of the flaws of the main game, such as repetitive crimes and hideouts, there are several small improvements here and there, such as less grind and new unique tasks. So completing it was still fun. Overall, it's a step forward, even if it is a small one. Spider-Man Miles Morales. This is a spin-off of the original Marvel Spider-Man, rather than a sequel. As such, it is a much shorter game with far less content than its predecessor, and the gameplay basis is largely the same too. However, we assume the role of a new Spider-Man, Miles Morales, while Peter Parker is out of town. Miles is a good-natured guy who wants to help people, making him a great potential Spider-Man, but at the moment he is relatively inexperienced. The game features the same great traversal and fighting mechanics as the original, but with a few differences to reflect Miles' unique character. For example, the animations are different to show that Miles moves and fights in his own distinct way. His swinging in particular is more acrobatic and flashy than Peter's, reflecting Miles' youthful enthusiasm with a tint of inexperience. Additionally, Miles has a few unique powers of his own, such as the ability to generate bioelectricity called Venom, and the ability to cloak himself to become invisible.
What the hell? Where'd he go?
I am going to be honest, I am not sure I am a fan of how they established Miles in this universe. While Miles' additional powers make for some interesting gameplay mechanics, it's odd that he's essentially a duplicate of Peter but better. He does all the same things but has more powers. It might have been more interesting if the game had established more differences between them as people, making them more distinct from one another. Peter could have been a genius inventor who creates advanced suits and gadgets, as he is, while Miles could have been more focused on his unique powers and be a more emotionally intelligent hero. And he is that, but he is also a genius inventor who creates advanced suits and gadgets. I really don't like S-pools like that, and sadly this game is full of them. Just convenient plot devices that, even if not logical, must happen for the sake of the plot. I can't believe that 23-year-old Peter Parker, An experienced Spider-Man and a brilliant scientist with access to science equipment could develop a new super suit with the help of genius Otto Octavius. On the other hand, I can't believe that two 15-year-old students working from their home while the parents are away could create a suit that's on par with Peter's in just half a day, without any proper equipment or experience with such technology. Not only that, they even upgraded Peter's suit interface and developed a new app all at the same time. And the whole game is like this. I have no words. Overall, the main story didn't quite hit the mark for me. I didn't feel a strong emotional connection between Miles and the main villain, the Tinkerer. The character of Tinkerer seemed poorly developed. Their motivations were corrupt, they hurt innocent people, and they likely killed many. They even aided gangs in terrorizing the city by providing them with weapons. Yet, the game attempted to convince me once and once again that I should feel sorry for them and forgive their actions. It was frustrating to see Miles repeatedly giving Tinkerer second chances, despite their ruthless actions and complete disregard for innocent lives.
How about we use our words?
It seemed unrealistic that Miles, a fledgling superhero, would continue to trust them even after they repeatedly beat him up and caused destruction in the city. It made me feel disconnected from the story and I just wanted it to be over. On the other hand, secondary activities are where Spider-Man Miles Morales truly shines. One of the key additions to the game is a friendly neighborhood app where people leave their requests for Spider-Man. As you answer these requests, you are given side missions, each with a unique story, from someone stealing toys from the shelter to helping the city by clearing ice from the crane. In the original game, you either help the police or deal with the bad guys directly, but these missions allow you to help regular people of New York City that just need a hero. Dealing with such local problems make it a lot more grounded. This approach feels very fitting for a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Apart from the app, the game also introduces other activities, some of which are absolutely new, such as sampling city sounds for a new song while being held by your uncle. This is a unique and exciting task that is nothing like any activities of the main game. Most of the other activities are just a new take on the ones from the original game. Time capsules, for instance, are similar to Peter's bags, where you find them, look at the 3D model, and Miles comments something from his life.
Got this on a field trip to a Wakandan Design Group Expo. Finn saw all the tech on display and shouted, "I want to be an engineer!" Guess it's stuck.
We also get the return of our beloved crimes and hideouts here. But wait! They improved them. Instead of beating 150 repetitive crimes throughout the city, for completion you just need to beat each type of crime once, and there are just 10 types. And 10 is a much smaller number than 150. Plus, you can spawn crimes from the app, so there is no aspect of randomness here. Hideouts can also be considered better, as they are far less grindy. Instead of 6 waves of enemies, you get 2, and you can complete the whole hideout in stealth if you want. In the original, you would be revealed on wave 2 no matter what. Another thing that I liked is that rather than purchasing most of the suits with tokens, you get a lot of suits directly for completing activities. For example, beating all challenges rewards you with this one, while beating all hideouts gets you another. This is a great change, as it gives even more incentive to do secondary missions by providing direct rewards and not just currency. However, I can see how some people may not like this change, because to receive the suit that they want, it forces them to complete specific activities that they may not like. Currency, by the way, is also changed. Instead of each activity having its own token and overcomplicating things, there are activity tokens now that you get for doing almost anything secondary in the game. More player-friendly and a lot less confusing. A small but welcome change. This can be said about most of the secondary activities design actually, full of small changes that do not alter the game itself, but enhance the experience with added convenience. Thanks to all these improvements in accessibility and the game being shorter, we have an even more accessible 100% achievement. A staggering 18% of people went for completion here, which is a testament to how removing unnecessary grinding and making the game more accessible increases the percentage of people that will complete your game, even if other aspects, such as the story, seem less developed. Conclusion. Designing a game that people will not only enjoy, but will want to see through to the end is a challenging task. But it's not impossible. So let's summarize the 3 steps to achieving that goal. The first step is to have a solid foundation. A compelling story, well-written relatable characters, and engaging gameplay mechanics that are fun to play. The second step is to add a variety of high-quality activities to the game world. This can include unique side missions, interesting collectibles, and formidable challenges that are entertaining enough to keep players hooked. And the final third step is to make sure that the game completion is accessible. This means that players should not feel as if they need to grind for countless hours for the achievement. It's crucial to avoid frustrating grindy content and to provide players with meaningful rewards that will serve as incentive for them to keep playing. And this is how I believe you can create a game that people would want to beat for 100%. Marvel's Spider-Man is an excellent example of how all this can be done. And it's no wonder that it has become one of the most beloved games of recent years, even though it's not yet ideal. We see that developers take note of the formula and improve it even more, first with the DLC, and then even more with the Miles Morales game, especially the latter, as it addressed some of the biggest problems I had with the completion of the original game. I have very high hopes that developers will continue to improve upon these ideas in Spider-Man 2, so it truly would be the most completed game in the world.